Okay, let's unpack this. January 2013, it's quite a scene to picture. You walk into your high school gym, this one in Valdosta, Georgia,
Right. Lawns High School.
and you find a classmate, Kendrick Johnson, he's 17, found dead inside a rolled-up gym mat.
It's just, yeah, bizarre and deeply unsettling. And it kicked off this whole decade-plus search for answers, didn't it?
It really did. What seemed like maybe a straightforward, though tragic, finding just spiraled.
And what's striking right away is how this puzzle just immediately had these conflicting pieces. Or maybe no clear solution at all. It really shows how, initial assumptions can get turned on their head when new info comes out. And of course, the power of a family just refusing to accept the official story.
Absolutely. And Kendrick himself, I mean, reading about him, he sounds like a great kid.
Yeah, the descriptions are always sweet, quiet.
A three-sport athlete, dreaming of playing pro football, just 17. The shock for his family, the community, must have been just immense.
And the first official word from the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, was accidental death.
Right. Positional asphyxia.
Exactly. The theory being he'd, gone into the mat head first, maybe reaching for a shoe. Apparently kids stored shoes in those mats sometimes.
To avoid locker fees, I read that too.
Yeah. And somehow he got stuck, couldn't breathe. Positional asphyxia just means basically suffocating because of the body's position.
But yeah, the family just couldn't. They couldn't accept it. It didn't feel right to them.
No. And that led them to hire their own pathologist, which really was a huge turning point.
Because that second autopsy found something completely different.
Completely. Blunt force trauma. To the right side of Kendrick's neck, the soft tissues there.
So suddenly, it's not just a freak accident narrative anymore.
No, not at all. This suggests some kind of external force, Something happened to him.
And that clash between the two autopsies, it just throws everything up in the air, doesn't it?
It really does. One says accident, tragic, but, self-contained. The other points to violence. How do you reconcile that? That's the core issue here.
And it wasn't just the family pushing. By October 2013, the U.S. Attorney's Office got involved.
Right, for the Middle District of Georgia. They opened a formal review. That seemed like a big deal, like an acknowledgement of the questions.
It did. But then, fast forward to June 2016, and the Department of Justice, well, they announced no criminal charges.
Yeah, they said there wasn't enough evidence, specifically for a willful civil rights violation or any other federal crime they could prosecute.
Which, legally, maybe makes sense, given the high bar for federal cases.
Right, the burden of proof is very high.
But for the family and people following the case, it must have felt like a dead end, or at least a major setback.
Definitely. It highlights that, not enough evidence to prosecute isn't the same as saying we know what happened and it was definitely an accident. It just means the legal threshold wasn't met for federal charges.
So to really get our heads around this, we've been looking at a few different sources. There's the Wikipedia page for the timeline, kind of the overview.
The basic sequence of events.
Then Pieces and People magazine, all is interesting.
Yeah.
They give a bit more of the human side, the family struggle, the lingering doubts.
Right, more narrative focus there.
And also a piece from Z-Blog, which covered the reopening of the case later on. So our goal here is kind of navigate these different takes, try to figure out the key conflicts, the stuff that's still just unanswered.
Yeah, and stepping back, this whole case, it really makes you think about the limits of, figuring out what happened in the past, especially when the very first look, the initial investigation, gets questioned so heavily.
Right.
It's tough separating hard facts from interpretations and the impact of that uncertainty on the people involved. It's profound.
Okay, so let's just restate that core conflict because it's crucial. GBI autopsy, accidental asphyxia, family's private autopsy, blunt force trauma. And then later, a third autopsy confirmed that blunt force trauma finding and also revealed that some of Kendrick's organs were missing.
Which is just incredibly disturbing.
Yeah, it's not just a small disagreement. It's fundamental. Cause of death, the state of his body, completely different stories.
And the implications are huge. Blunt force trauma points away from a solo accident, suggests someone else or something else was involved. And then the missing organs, that just opens up a whole other set of questions about how his body was handled, right? Was the first investigation thorough? Why weren't they there for later examination? It fuels all sorts of suspicion.
And the family's fight for what they see as justice, it's been relentless. That huge lawsuit on $100 million against, 38 people?
Yeah, including the sons of an FBI agent, which added another layer of complexity and suspicion for some.
But they had to withdraw it eventually. And then incredibly, they were ordered to pay the legal fees for the people they sued. Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That must have been absolutely crushing. The judge apparently accused them of fabricating evidence. It really shows how high the stakes were and how tough it is to prove these kinds of conspiracy claims legally.
It's a real David and Goliath situation sometimes.
Definitely. Then you've got the surveillance footage from the gym. That's another major point of contention.
Oh, yeah. Hours of footage just missing.
Right. And the cameras that were working weren't synced up properly time-wise.
And maybe the most critical part, the actual spot where he was found, in that corner with the mats. No camera covered it directly.
So authorities said, technical glitches, motion sensors maybe weren't triggered.
Plausible explanations, perhaps?
But you can absolutely see why the family saw that and thought, hang on, this looks suspicious. Tampering cover-up?
Yeah.
It feeds right into those fears.
Exactly. When you're searching for answers, missing evidence or unreliable evidence like that, it just creates more questions, more ambiguity. That gap in the footage is a gap in the story.
And it just keeps getting stranger. The funeral home, when they got Kendrick's body after the first autopsy.
They found it stuffed with newspaper.
Newspaper.
Yeah. Because they were apparently told his internal organs were gone.
Yeah.
Decomposed, discarded, and the newspaper was just filler, standard practice, according to whoever told them that.
Wow. Okay, that's not something you hear every day.
No. The family filed a complaint, obviously. There was an investigation by the Secretary of State's office.
Mm-hmm.
They cleared the funeral home of wrongdoing, but did say it wasn't, quote, best practice.
Not best practice. Yeah, I'd say that's an understatement. Even if it wasn't technically illegal or part of some conspiracy, it's another detail that just feels wrong. And it must have added so much distress for the family, eroded trust even further.
Definitely. But then things shifted again, March 2021, so 8 years later.
Right, a long time after.
The Lowndes County Sheriff, Ashley Pock, he reopened the case, said he was personally committed to taking a fresh look.
He even put up his own money, right? A huge reward.
Yeah, $500,000 reward for information leading to a conviction. And he got the federal investigation files handed over too. It felt like maybe, okay, here we go, something new might finally come out.
It was definitely a significant move. It signaled that, maybe the questions weren't totally settled. Give the family some renewed hope, I imagine.
Then came January 2022. Sheriff Polk announced the results of his reinvestigation.
Yeah.
And he came to the same conclusion as the GBI originally did. No evidence of homicide. No cover-up. No conspiracy.
Wow. Back to square one, essentially.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
He reaffirmed the accidental death finding. And he specifically said that the brothers that Johnsons had accused were not suspects. So despite the fresh look, the reward, the federal files, the official conclusion didn't change.
That must have been incredibly frustrating for the Johnson family after all that time, all their efforts, to end up right back at the explanation they rejected from day one.
Yeah.
It just goes to show how hard it can be to overturn an initial finding, even when there are these persistent, troubling questions and conflicting pieces of evidence like the second autopsy.
So after everything, we're left with this weight. Conflicting autopsies, missing organs, questionable surveillance footage, investigations that reach opposite conclusions, a family that just will not give up after more than a decade.
It's a lot to hold.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does this case, the Kendrick Johnson case, ultimately tell us about finding the truth, about justice, especially when things are so murky, so emotionally charged?
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder of how elusive a single, clear truth can be. You have the same set of, some agreed upon facts, but then these wildly different narratives emerge.
Right.
And you see the deep human need for answers, for closure, bumping up against the reality that sometimes maybe those definitive answers just aren't reachable, or at least haven't been reached yet here. It leaves you thinking about how we handle that kind of profound uncertainty.